The man lifted his head and looked at the sky, seeing a plane flying close to him. He turned and ran as hard as he could, and managed to hide behind the door as the plane crashed. It all started from a normal weekend. Amanda booked a house on the internet for a vacation. She and her husband Clay were very happy with the big, luxurious house in front of them. Their children, Rosie and Archie, also had fun in the pool. As planned, they would spend a perfect vacation here. However, strange things began to happen. In the parking lot outside the city, Amanda saw a man who behaved strangely. The man bought several boxes of water and a lot of other materials. He also showed a sharp look when their eyes met. Amanda just felt weird at the time and didn't care too much. She dismissed it, and her family went to the beach to enjoy sunbathing. On the surface of the sea, a ship caught the attention of her daughter, Rosie. She seemed to sense the danger that was coming. Rosie stared ahead intently, mumbling incessantly. When Amanda lifted her head again, the ship was very close, almost hit the beach. It all started now. The beach was filled with people watching. The cruise ship showed no signs of stopping. Amanda and her husband, Clay, looked at each other, then quickly packed their things. The people around them finally realized how serious this problem was. They started screaming and running in all directions. The ship finally ran aground and stopped, but there were no casualties. The officers couldn't explain the reason behind this. Time passed until night. A woman and a man, Ruth and G.H. Scott, appeared at the door of the house. They claimed to be the owners of the house. Because of the power outage in the city, they had to come back here to take shelter. Amanda's husband, Clay, kindly invited them in. Amanda, however, was full of hostility towards the two people in front of her. She opened her laptop and wanted to contact Airbnb. Unfortunately, there was no internet, and she could only get angry. Considering the situation, Scott, Ruth's father, offered to return the full money to compensate them. Amanda's family also didn't need to stay with two strangers. Amanda felt very uncomfortable. She suspected that the two people were not the owners of the house at all. Amanda rudely began to check Scott's identity. Then a painful alarm sounded in her ear. It turned out Ruth turned on the television in the living room. There were no channels that had pictures. Instead, there were a few lines of power outage notifications. It turned out what Scott said, true. There was a massive power outage in the city. With this, Amanda had no reason to kick them out. She was still very wary of the two people. She couldn't sleep in bed for a long time, isolated from the outside world. The whole house was filled with an uncomfortable atmosphere. When everyone was asleep, the screen showed a more frightening image. The next morning, Amanda woke up by Rosie's insistence. She told her daughter to get out. Amanda took her phone, and the screen suddenly had some news notifications. On the screen, there was a report about a hacker attack on the network. When Amanda woke up her husband, the notification was gone because it was accidentally deleted. After a night, the network signal still hadn't recovered. This made Rosie, who had never been away from electronic products since she was little, feel very bored. She walked to the edge of the pool and sat down. She turned and saw some deer staring at her sharply. This strange scene was not reported by Rosie to her parents. Instead, she walked slowly into the forest. When she approached, she found that the number of deer was far more than she imagined. Amanda's attitude eased a bit. She told Scott and Ruth about the hacker information she saw on her phone. Scott, who was always calm, also showed discomfort. He looked at the cabinet that contained a gun and seemed to know something, but he hid some secrets that no one else knew. Meanwhile, Clay drove to look for help in the city. The network made the car lose its navigation signal. He also got lost in a strange place. When he was desperate, he met a woman, and the woman seemed to have experienced something terrible. She asked Clay to take her away. They spoke different languages. The woman's anxious voice made Clay feel very nervous. He ran away from the scene. He was not conscious. The scene in front of him made him scared again. Helicopters in the air threw red objects to the ground. Clay turned the car and ran away quickly. Soon after, he couldn't escape, and the red paper covered his car. On the other side, Scott vaguely remembered that his neighbor had a satellite phone. When he got to the house by the sea, the place was as if it had been hit by a hurricane. When he was just about to leave, he saw some objects scattered on the beach. When he approached, he saw a watch buried in the sand. It turned out to be a severed hand. Body parts and plane debris were scattered on the nearest beach. This was the site of a plane crash. He turned his head up and saw another plane in the air. The plane fell towards him. He turned and ran as hard as he could. He hid in the house when the plane crashed. The planes that fell in succession. This verified Scott's suspicion. He honestly told Amanda that the satellite phone in the house was broken. The only possibility that caused this phenomenon was that the country's satellite in outer space had a problem. Amanda suddenly remembered her 2 children. She couldn't find them for half a day. The next second, a loud noise suddenly sounded. The glass inside shattered instantly. Amanda covered her ears tightly and ran into the forest. The sound was everywhere. It drove people crazy. Not long after, the sound finally stopped. Like many events before, she didn't know what caused it. The known danger made Scott and Amanda argue again. At this time, her husband finally returned home. He took out a red piece of paper from his pocket, which was a paper dropped from the helicopter. There was a picture of a venomous snake on the paper. Archie knew the picture. The picture meant a message: death to America. Hearing that made them scared. Amanda's family decided not to sit still. They drove to her sister's house in New Jersey to avoid other disasters. But when they just left, they got stuck in a big traffic jam. Amanda got out of the car and looked around. She saw that all the cars in front of her crashed into each other. This horrible situation forced them to stop on the road. These cars came from the same company and model. This car is famous for its self-driving technology. Amanda wondered what happened at first. She looked up when she heard a sound. A car came towards them. The road was blocked by a pile of cars. Amanda quickly got into the car and avoided another collision. They had no choice but to go back to their house. Rosie looked at her tablet with frustration. She just wanted to watch the last episode of Friends. It was a very small wish, but she couldn't get it either. With the situation that isolated them, Amanda and Scott chatted while drinking wine. The fire between them gradually faded. Scott told about his work related to the government department and a high-ranking official in the Defense Department. He was a cruel and indifferent character, but he was not evil. Amanda listened with suspicion as he talked about his plans. He said there were some things that had to happen, and it was clearly not small things. The story ended with Amanda feeling more relaxed, but then Scott told a time when he joked with his friend that all the big events came from a group of people. His friend didn't laugh and just kept quiet, indicating that there was something his friend knew. Suddenly, a flock of flamingos flew to their pool, and the second sound wave came back. Their lights went out suddenly. They were scared and decided to sleep. Rosie then said that she was tired of waiting, reminding of the event she saw in the movie she used to watch. But Amanda didn't pay attention to her words. She went back to sleep early without knowing where she was going. The next morning, Amanda's son, Archie, was pale. He vomited blood and his teeth were very easy to pull out. Everyone panicked at first, but soon they found out that Rosie had also left the house. Archie, who was sick, her daughter disappeared silently. This made Amanda lose control of her emotions. They scattered to do different actions. Ruth and Amanda went looking for Rosie in the nearest forest. Clay and Scott would take Archie to Scott's acquaintance's house, Danny, to get medicine. The person was the one who hoarded supplies in the opening scene of the film. When he saw their arrival, and he had prepared a weapon, he told Scott and Clay to back off and keep a safe distance from him, seeing that there was no trust among the people. He also didn't want to share his medicine. With a gun pointed at Scott, he asked him what he wanted. Clay tried to stop him by offering a high price for his medicine. And finally, Danny agreed after feeling sorry. Danny also explained that the red paper that Clay found earlier, there are several different language versions, and the reason why may be because America has too many enemies. Anyone could be the mastermind behind this. At the same time, the two women faced a strange attack from a herd of deer. Without technology and information, they could only rely on the most primitive way to protect themselves. They swung their arms. They let out a roar like wild animals. When the herd of deer realized the danger, they ran back into the bushes. Then they continued to look for Rosie. After that, Amanda saw a house from a distance. She thought her daughter might have gone there. But Ruth was stunned to see something. She was so shocked that she couldn't say a word. At the same time, Scott and Clay returned to the car. Previously, he was only a little suspicious. Now, all the evidence has proven his suspicion. Among the many military invasion strategies, there is one effective combat strategy. This strategy is simple. It only requires 3 steps. It can overthrow the government from within. The first step is isolation. They cut off their communication and transportation. This can make the target turn into unable to communicate. The second step is a secret attack and false information to scare them, making their defenses easily attacked by extremists and their own state soldiers. They don't know who their enemy is. They will start attacking each other. And at that time, the third step will happen naturally. The scene change. Amanda saw what Ruth saw in the distance. Across the city, a large-scale warfire swept the entire city. Big explosions and gunfire exactly as Scott thought. On the other side, Rosie was in the house that Amanda saw earlier. She opened the iron door. She went down the stairs and found that it was a bunker. This place is well equipped. There are a lot of supplies. What interested Rosie the most was the television in the middle of the living room. There was a wall full of videotapes. Rosie took one of the tapes. She finally got what she wanted all the time. The last episode of Friends. She watched calmly without caring what happened to the world. And the movie ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Because by subscribing, you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.